Okay, so these are the last two sets of slides. Individual ecology or animal behavior, and then the last one will be ecosystem ecology, which is like the big picture. I'm going to try to get through these pretty fast. Um, there are three categories of responses that we see in the with an individual responding. Physiological, so that's like my physiology, right? How I look. Uh, and like the functioning of what the body does. Morphological would be like color or like number of legs. Behavior is obviously like the behavior. Um, Both our genes and our upbringing dictate, or the environment dictate, those responses. We innate behavior is fixed, usually genetic. Learned behavior is going to be something that I learned based on like the parenting that I received, the environment that I am located in. Um, so don't worry about this for now. This is just like moving on. Different types of behavior that you should know. Cooperative behavior, when they have a common interest, working together, usually in a pack mentality. Agnostic, agnostic, look up that word, it's very interesting. But agonistic behavior, agnostic is believing in nothing if you're like into like theology and like religion. Um, Agonistic behavior is like social behavior that is fighting or sparring, usually like when they're fighting for mates and things like that. Reconciliation behavior, like making up after fights. Um, we also see like dominance hierarchies, also known as a pecking order. There is like an alpha individual and beta individuals. Um, we also see that certain organisms go through a fixed action pattern. It's a sequence of innate, so it's genetic behavior acts that happen repeatedly. Um, it can be different categories, but it's usually agonistic, so in response to like a threat or an aggressive behavior. Um, so basically there's this fish called the three-spined stickleback, and it exhibits the same pattern every single time when it's threatened. Um, Similar to like a pufferfish, right? They blow up in response to a threat. That's innate. They do that automatically. Another behavior we see is imprinting. This is both innate and learned during the critical period, which is like right after birth. The organism like imprints on a certain organism, hopefully their mother, and it learns like certain very like important things. This movie talks about like Canadian geese that imprint on a guy, and he has to teach them how to fly and all that stuff. Um, for organisms that are not higher level thinkers, there are specific movements or patterns that they exhibit that are in response to something. Kinesis, change in activity rate in response to stimuli. So these are like bugs that will like move to drier areas or move to like wetter areas just based on like the touch of the dry area. Um, Taxis, moving away or towards a stimulus, usually away, right? If you move your hand in front of a fish tank, the fish automatically moves away. Migration has to do with like seasonal changes, and we see like full groups of organisms moving. Oops. When organisms are communicating, we see that there's this signal either coming from another organism or from the environment, and it changes the organism's behavior, and then they communicate that information back and forth. Um, there is chemical communication, pheromones and scent. So pheromones is going to be like when you see if you have a cat who is unspayed or unfixed, he might like spray furniture to indicate that like this is my territory. Dogs do this. Other scent like the skunk is warning. Auditory communication, vocalization, right? The beating of wings in flies, frogs making a noise, birds chirping, squirrels making noises, That's the most common type of communication. Um, what we see is that we're starting to learn a lot about how organisms learn. And so they'll have an experience, and then what do they do after they've gone through that experience more than once? This can happen due to maturation, just like as they get older, their brain develops more. It can be due to habituation, whereas they're exposed to certain things so many times, they become immune to it. This is like horses are very skittish. If you habituate them or you expose them to like loud noises consistently, they will then no longer be afraid of that. Uh, Spatial learning, that's like uh, learning where certain like hazards are, prospective mates, nest sites, and like learning where their environment is. Associative learning, which is the highest level, is behavior through trial and error. Um, this Not all organisms can do this, can respond to like a stimulus. But this associated learning, there's a couple types. Classical conditioning, just reward and punishment. Basically, Pavlov rang a bell and would feed the dog. So eventually, when he rang the bell, the dog knew that the food was coming. Operant conditioning is more trial and error, and so it allowed the organism to try multiple avenues of doing something, and then the one that was most successful, they would then do that again to receive the food. When it comes to associative learning, we also see that organisms have the ability to problem solve. Monkeys in a like test setting were stacking boxes to reach things. A lot of primates have learned how to use sticks to harvest ants out of logs. Otters have learned to use rocks to crack open shells of organisms they want to eat. When we think about this in an evolutionary sense, the organism that is most able to learn or have cognition is obviously going to be the most successful. In trying to find food, the more effective we are at finding food, the more we will survive. In finding a mate, if we can find like a more virile or like fertile mate, we will be better off. When we talk about mating, there's a couple different groups. Promiscuous, there's no bond between males and females, so everyone mates with everyone. Monogamous is one male mating with one female pretty much all the time, like penguins. Polygamous are going to be individuals of one sex mating with several of the other sex, so we see like one male with multiple females, similar to like a lion pride. And then there's polygyny and polyandry. Polygyny is one male, multiple females. Polyandry is one female mates with several males. I should say males, not females. So within groups, we see social behavior. There is agonistic behavior, which is like fighting, dominance, territoriality, defending your area against certain organisms. These are just some examples of different things. So when we talk about like which organism is most fit, right? And usually for me to be most fit, I'm going to be really selfish, right? I get the food, I mate, I'm the most successful. So there's been a question a lot about how does altruism or like helping others fit into our idea of evolution and fitness, right? Because we as humans, we are very fit for our environment, but technically we would be altruistic, right? We'd help people. Essentially, if we can increase the fitness of those around us, so if I also help the other organisms around me survive, if I'm in like a pack or community mentality, their fitness also lends to me being more fit. And so basically the idea is that if I'm just fit on my own, I'm less likely to succeed than if I'm fit, I help the other organisms around me to stay alive. Therefore, collectively, we are more fit and going to pass on our genetics. And And this is also like a sociology theory, if you're really interested in this. Don't worry about this too much. um, these are just all examples and things like that. You just need to know the core concepts. And then we'll pause here. We'll move on to the last set of slides. Oop. Okay, hopefully we can get this done pretty quickly. So the last type of ecology is going to be your like ecosystem ecology, looking at biomes and ecosystems. The ecosystem has to do with matter and energy. So my biotic living things, and then the non-living things, heat, chemicals, I already said temperature, stuff like that impacts those interactions. What we know is that it all starts with this idea of primary production. We get sunlight, and then my biotic factor, my plants, convert that into usable energy. Gross primary productivity is the total amount of energy that producers convert my sunlight into a chemical energy in a certain amount of time. Net is what's left over after my plant uses the energy it needs. What we do know is that we start out with this massive energy, and by the time we get to my tertiary consumers, the amount of energy gain is very little. Humans are secondary consumers at the top of the food chain, so we're receiving very little energy. Arguably, this is one of the reasons why people go vegetarian, that they believe that they're getting a direct source of energy from the plants, and so their like energy source is not diluted. These are called biomass pyramids. So there's a lot of stuff going on. We know at each level we're losing heat. Energy is being passed on, and so that's why when we get to the top, basically energy is lost at each time. Also, when I consume food, only some of that energy would be passed on if something ate me. I'm using some of that energy for cellular respiration, for growing. Some of it is excreted as waste, and so we see that energy is lost in multiple forms. There's multiple biogeochemical cycles. Nitrogen cycle, I would just pause each of these slides and look at them. The phosphorus cycle, the water cycle, carbon cycle, and then we see nutrient cycling takes all those things and combines them. Basically, the idea is that abiotic factor, carbon, phosphorus, nitrogen, gets incorporated into something biotic, so an organism, a plant, and is passed from part to part. We'll move on from here. When we talk about biomes, there are a lot of aquatic biomes, and what we see is that depending on the season, those biomes look very, very different due to ice and the things that are incorporated into the water. We see freshwater biomes, right? Lakes, things like that. Another water biome, wetlands and estuaries. This is where a mix of freshwater and saltwater is. The most common or famous one is the Gulf Coast, where the Mississippi River exits into the ocean. We see marine biomes, and there are specific groups within this. Coral reef, a tidal pool, right? A tide zone, a benthos, which makes like certain chemicals that are very deep in the water. All these different types. Terrestrial biomes don't change based on seasons, really. They are all here. Tropical rainforest, savanna, desert biome, chaparral or scrubland, temperate grasslands, which is a lot of the time in Asia and center of the U.S., temperate forest, where we are, the taiga, which is going to be north of us, tundra, way far north, and so we see that they all come together. I'm going to pause here, wrap up the rest of this video in the final, or the slides in this final video.